Despite years of efforts to streamline document-based processes, government agencies continue to struggle to fully streamline them. From processing disability claims to managing military records, and countless hours are still wasted on manual data entry, filing, and verification. And these inefficient processes not only slow down service delivery, but also contribute to errors and delays and frustration for citizens at large who rely on government services. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and one company that's helping agencies embrace automation and AI to actually reduce administrative bottlenecks and ensure that essential services reach citizens with greater speed, accuracy, and impact is Hyperscience, which is working to transform how government agencies handle documents. Joining us to talk about how agencies are actually making headway in this area is Andrew Joiner, Chief Executive Officer at Hyperscience. Andrew, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Wyatt, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Let's set the stage a little bit. What are you seeing as the biggest challenges that government agencies are still facing when it comes to streamlining their document-based processes?
There are a couple of things that I think the government uniquely has to deal with that we don't have to deal with even in the corporate environments. Number one, the scale at which the US government has to operate is massive. It is there for our citizenry, 300 million people of all forms and walks of life. And they're handling things that are complex in information needs, from our medical histories, if you're submitting benefits, all the way to sensitive information. It could be a small business asking for a loan, and that you have to submit complex financial information. So the information handling needs are also unique and complex. And then you have the ability that this is complex PII. It has to be handled in a certain manner and protected. And so traditional cloud techniques don't work all that well. And so you've got this intersection of complexity that the US government has to deal with. Hyperscience, the good news is there's a way through this, and AI and ML is at the core of it. We built our company specifically to help organizations like the US government address it. And we do that in a pretty unique way. It's pretty simple. We can handle it at scale. We can handle documents and forms of all their needs using ML. And essentially, it doesn't matter what that form of the information is, whether it's handwriting and complex medical information to even financial information, we can handle it. And then lastly, we do it in the way the government can do it safely and securely. And that's one of the big ways by which the government can take advantage of these newer technologies that Hyperscience is providing.
And then can you describe how Hyperscience's platform not only automates that document processing, we know there's a lot of platforms that do that kind of thing, but actually sets the stage for intelligent next step actions and outcomes?
Yeah, so there have been technologies for decades that have been able to try to read information like a human, and they do that through OCR technologies. And that's really looking at pixels on a page and discerning the pattern. And so you go from essentially maybe a printed or a digital form into more of a machine readable information. That's one core step. The problem is for the last 20 years, it hasn't worked that well. And even as we've tried to go to cloud-based technologies, which really aren't available for the government, they've never gotten past 50 to 60% accuracy. And so what happens? Well, you still have to process all that. You're still the government. You still need all that information. And so you typically take the stuff that isn't read very well and give it to manual keyers. And those individuals sit in contact centers, and all day long, they're keying in data entry. Now, the challenge for the US government is you can't use typical offshore techniques to keep your labor costs down. And so the issue is it's very expensive, it's very costly and very time consuming when the technologies don't work that well. So Hyperscience took a novel approach. Not only do we use models, just like generative AI techniques, we have specialized models that can read all the forms of human information. We do so with an accuracy harness to ensure we do it at 99.5% accuracy. It's an input to our platform. So we read information fluently despite how complex it is. But then once we've done that, you can start to solve the downstream areas that you use that information, such as to approve a government loan or to approve the adjudication of a claim. And because we have accurate data, we can load rules, we can use models to handle all those next steps. And what you have is essentially a digital workforce. It acts just like the old technology. It's better than the OCR, and it handles what the contact centers did, but it's now all digital labor, all wrapped up in one infrastructure.
And then can you share a couple of examples of use cases of government agencies that are kind of moving forward with this technology, maybe highlighting the challenges they were facing and then how hyperscience helped them overcome them?
We're proud of a lot of our relationships with the U.S. government. And one of that's very important to all of us is the U.S. Veterans Affairs Organization. It handles all of the medical claims that the people who have been in service for our country, over 9.5 million veterans. And as you can imagine, the history of that information, the medical claims history, gets very complex. We deal with over 1 billion documents a year of handling the submissions that the veterans submit into the organization. And that information has to all be handled. It all has to be read and adjudicated. And it used to take the organization about 3 months for a particular claim to work its way through for approval decision. We can now do that in as few as 3 days. And that's because we can read the information with high clarity, summarize it in a format now for keyers who can essentially much more quickly ascertain whether it's approved or not. And those are the techniques. It's almost a digital labor, but it's hundreds of millions of dollars of savings to the US government. And as we know in the new climate, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you are, efficiency is at the forefront. And we need ways to serve our citizenry more efficiently, but also recognizing that behind every one of those claims is an important individual. We say there's almost a human behind every document. It's an important claim submission, and we need that process to be smooth and expedient for those important individuals. That's one great example of hyperscience really helping the government.
Terrific. And then moving on a little, how does hyperscience ensure its platform also meets, government agencies' security and compliance requirements?
Well, we've been from the very beginning always on a journey to be able to run our advanced ML models on an on-premise perspective. And even beyond that, we can run what's called a DDIL environment. It's basically disconnected, it's intermittent, it's latent, basically not connected to the cloud. So that information of our citizenry isn't part of any types of large language models processing, which the sovereignty of that information is no longer controlled. We hand it over to a third party. So from the very beginning, we built applications to run our models natively on the government infrastructure. It doesn't have to be connected to the cloud. And you have full transparency of the information that you train, what goes into the training, and who has access to it. What we've done recently, which is a big step for hyperscience, is to also obtain an important federal certification, which is FedRAMP High. And we've done that through a partnership with Palantir, who has a FedStart program to help accelerate companies who are on the cutting edge of ML, but have already made progress at protecting and securing that information. And together with them, we can obtain that validation that we have all the steps necessary to hire the most sensitive information and to handle the most sensitive information of the US government inside of our platform, which means any agency in the US government can take advantage of our platform without concern that the information could be subject to nefarious activity.
Well, that certainly gives a tremendous platform to operate around. I'm sure that's reassuring for CIOs. What other advice would you give them who are kind of simultaneously looking to modernize their operations and adopt AI-powered document processing solutions based on what you've been learning?
Sometimes the use of AI gets a little bit watered, and we think of AI today just from a generative perspective. We've used OpenAI, and we've seen how amazing it is at generating information. But there's also a movement that's happened in parallel with this. Hyperscience isn't a new company. We've been around over 10 years building models, and we're the opposite of generative AI in that we actually read information as an input. So we're applying a different type of technique. And so as you think about the AI landscape, you really want to have an understanding that ML can be applied in different ways to solve problems and novel uses. And that allows you to get massive benefits because essentially what you can do is recreate what some of your labor force is having to do in a tedious fashion each day. You can use ML to replace that essentially task at scale. And it's massive efficiencies. And so not only do you get cost benefits, you actually end up improving the experience for your citizenry. And so it's a win-win situation for organizations. The technology's never existed, but it exists now for us to take advantage of it.
And then lastly, looking forward, I know in the AI age, it's coming fast and furious. It's hard to make any predictions, but what key trends do you see in the public sector that a company like yours at Hyperscience is really well positioned to address in the future for the challenges government faces?
Well, people think that documents are going away, but what you realize is that documents actually are almost at the core of how we operate. And even though we have generative AI, which seems digital, you still need documents as a permanent. So you still need a driver's license. You still need a passport to go across borders. You still need a ticket to get into stadiums. You still need a filing that validates you paid your taxes, and you'd like a receipt that says you did so. Documents give a permanence to the transactions that we do on a daily basis. They're not going anywhere. And now we have technologies that can read the documents just as well as humans. And so there's a new intersection of that we get to play with where machines can be inserted into this new process and start to handle our processes at a faster, more efficient rate. And I think it's going to change the paradigm of the back office. Only 9% of organizations have been able to use generative AI in the back office. And it's because of the complexity of the information. It's because the infrastructure needs, the handling of sensitive information. These are all hurdles, but that's now behind us. We've technically been able to accomplish that. And I think companies like Hyperscience are going to play a very important role in how our citizenry reacts and works with the government or with corporations at large in the future.
Exciting to hear. Well, Andrew Joiner, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspective on how we can capitalize on this document-centric world that we live in government, but make it work much better for both government employees and the citizens at large. So thank you for joining us.
Wyatt, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.